Hello everyone! The Easy SMX X05 was a really nice controller. When I reviewed it, I praised it for the great ergonomics. And it was the controller that introduced to me the tape mod that I use today in all my first party controllers that doesn't have anti-friction rings. And I really wanted to see a better version of this controller. And to my surprise, Easy SMX made it. This Pro version improves on a few things. First, we have this limited color, the Aurora Purple. The buttons are steel membrane buttons, but they retain the same quality. It doesn't sink flat with the shell, and the resistance is alright. The analog sticks still has a plastic shaft, and it doesn't have internal restriction rings. This is something that could have received an improvement. The sticks are basically the same as before. The Dpad, however, received a big upgrade. Now it uses mechanical dumb switches, and it uses this disc layout. The Dpad is not removable, but it's very responsive. All of the menu buttons are membrane buttons, and the RGB lights have changed a little. The shutter buttons are mechanical, as well as the extra shortcut button. The triggers now uses Hall effect sensors, and they're super smooth. You have a trigger stopper, but it doesn't have a mechanical switch inside. It just stops the trigger. And the back of the controller is now rubberized. So basically on the back they added trigger stoppers and 2 extra shortcuts. But I really wished it had 2 extra back buttons too. And this is not an impossible thing to do. This other controller has the same shape of the X05. This is the Aurora controller from Ace Gamer. And on this controller we have trigger stoppers and 2 back buttons with a locking mechanism. So it's really possible to add back buttons to this controller if they wanted. But unfortunately, we'll have to wait for a third edition of this controller. And let's take a look at the RGB effects now. It has a wake up mode for the Nintendo Switch, and unfortunately, it still doesn't have motion controls. Why didn't they add it? It was my most requested feature on the previous version. Well, I guess we'll never know. I also tested it on the Switch 2 and it works alright. On PC, we can switch between D input and X input modes. And flipping the switch activates the Switch Pro controller mode. But this is kinda useless because we don't have gyro on this controller. The analog sticks has no dead zone, no cardinal snapping, there is a small outer dead zone, and the circularity isn't perfect, but the error rate is on par with first-party controllers, so it's alright I guess. The stick resolution has only 139 steps. On the D-pad test though, this D-pad is very good. The diagonals are easy to press, the input is consistent, and pushing on the center won't activate all 4 directions. You can hit the switches, but the firmware blocks all 4 directions from being activated. The triggers and trigger stoppers work correctly too. Keep in mind that there was an update to fix the trigger behavior. It has turbo, but it's only an on and off function. There's no toggle mode. And remapping the shortcut buttons is super easy. You can also record macros. Now for the unboxing before the teardown. To disassemble this controller, you have 4 screws on the back and 2 hidden screws on the front. The battery has 1000 milliamps of capacity. And here's the construction of the board. It was only here that I noticed that this controller has trigger vibration. But I tested on a game that shouldn't have trigger vibration and it didn't work. With that said, the triggers have a metal pivot in the construction, which is pretty good. Here's the front of the board, and the Hall effect sticks uses sensors from K-Silver. Here's the membranes and the face buttons. And the D-pad is on a separate board. Checking the latency test on Gamepad LA, the wired connection is pretty okay. But if you're playing with a dongle or Bluetooth, you'll have a lot of latency with the analog sticks. So if you're playing anything competitively, you should go wired. Moving to my final thoughts, the X05 Pro is better, but it could be much better to be considered a Pro controller. Judging by the other brands in the market, a Pro controller should have at least 4 shortcut buttons today. The sticks should also have a higher resolution than the normal, and the latency should be very low, which is okay if you use this controller with a cable. A gyro sensor is also highly necessary. I wouldn't consider the X05 Pro a Pro controller, but a premium edition of the X05. And that's it for today's video. I'll be leaving the links to the X05 Pro in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.